Good afternoon. It is my absolute pleasure to be here and to share a few thoughts about my ongoing research. My PhD is not about everything, but it is about several things. So it is about Arctic oil and gas development. It is about risks, and to be precise, environmental risks that are associated with oil and gas development in the Arctic. It is about risk-based decision-making and power relations. And finally, it is also about legal and regulatory regimes. So why Arctic? Why Arctic and why Arctic oil and gas? Well, predominantly because of the potential. According to US Geological Survey, Arctic contains 20% of world's undiscovered conventional oil and gas resources. It's quite a bit. Why else? Because of the ongoing activities in the Arctic. The Arctic is being mined, is being extracted, oil and gas are being extracted right now. And that can give us an information about the size of the future development. I am studying this part, which is the Barents region. And the reason why I'm studying the Barents region is probably best illustrated by this map. This very map of the Norwegian continental shelf. Well, needless to say, a lot is going on here. And as a matter of fact, many believe that if Norway and the Russian Federation, the other country from the Barents region, can make Arctic oil and gas work offshore there, other countries can repeat in other parts of the Arctic region. Speaking of the other side, this is the Russian side of the Barents region, and as a matter of fact, the first proper offshore oil was produced about a week ago, right from here, from the Prirazlomne, the infamous Prirazlomne field, the one that Greenpeace activists decided to occupy about a week ago. So we covered elephants today, so it's time to cover polar bears. This picture, I'm not as concerned about the activity itself as I am concerned about the implications, impacts of this activity. And this picture of a person dressed as a polar bear probably describes the emphasis on the impacts, on the nature of impacts that I'm studying, i.e. the natural and the human environment. And this picture is also very descriptive because it shows the systemic effect of environmental impacts of oil and gas development. It's an old Soviet airliner, and these little pieces are actually discarded fuel oil barrels. So I am studying the impacts, but I'm studying potential impacts. I'm studying their severity, and I'm studying their probability. To be more specific, I'm studying them in the context of decision-making. Thus, I'm studying so-called risk governance. So at this point, I might disappoint some members of this fine audience because the emphasis of my research and the scope of my research is on things that cannot be measured, at least at this point, in my view, quantitatively. I'm studying power relations. And to be more specific, I'm studying the initial phase of risk governance called pre-assessment. This is the phase where the inquiry is shaped by decision makers, by policy makers, and it is before the inquiry actually handed over to the very capable hands of quantitative researchers. This phase is dominated by power relations, and in this phase, a decision maker can decide that one risk is more important than the other, thereby circumventing the validity of the further scientific inquiry. So, I'm a lawyer, and I study legal and regulatory regimes. I'm a comparative lawyer, and comparative lawyers love the so-called functional method. There are two parts of the functional method. We do look at the law itself, what it says, i.e. I do a lot of reading of really, really boring text, the actual laws and regulations. And then there's the fun part where you actually look at the effect, both the intended effect, the desired effect and the actual effect that the law has, or the function that it performs. And to illustrate that, I have pictures of two platforms. This is the Priazolomna, the Greenpeace platform, and this is the platform under construction, the Goliath platform. And last but not the least, my preliminary findings. First, I have discovered that the Russian and the Norwegian legal and regulatory regimes treat risk analysis in a fundamentally different manners. And that perhaps explains why after 20 years of cooperating on this issue, both sides, they speak a different language. They don't understand each other. The second preliminary finding that I would like to share with you is the factors that play a role in shaping up power relations. The first group of factors is related to the nature of activity. Let's compare a decision about, say, spent fuel, nuclear fuel, and a development of a large oil and gas field. Absolutely different risks, absolutely different benefits, and people, actors involved in the analysis. The second group of factors is the identity, both the group identity and the individual identity. Group identity, networks versus institutions. Individual identity, well, let's say it's really hard to expect an objective decision from someone whose paycheck depends on the outcome of this decision. So, and the last group of factors is the allocation, i.e. how the risks are distributed geographically and temporarily vis-a-vis the decision maker. Thank you very much.
Can you give a very simple example of where they would differ from one to the other between the Russian and the
The burden of determining the risk lies on the operator, on the Norwegian regime. So it's the company that looks at all the circumstances, for example, surrounding a project, and actually figures out what it needs to do in terms of risk assessment and risk management to make sure that it operates safely. In the Russian Federation, the standard, the risk is predetermined by the government. So when the two parties get together and start talking about, well, let's talk about forming maybe a joint document on how we're going to regulate risk in this shared region. This is where disagreement starts from the very, very beginning, because the parties don't understand who actually is in charge of determining the risk. It's one small example, but there are more. Yes, please.
Do you think the environmental activist groups could actually form a more intelligent methodology for how they actually achieve their objectives?
That's a very good question. I do and I don't. I think I would place a greater importance on the structure in which they operate. Let's remember that the Greenpeace activists chose not to go and abstract drill ships on the Norwegian continental shelf, because there's some exploratory drilling going on there, and that exploratory drilling is much more environmentally dangerous, hazardous activity than the production. No, they ended up going and they ended up protesting in Russia, probably knowing that they might be thrown into jail. So, so the structure, why? Because I think environmental groups have much more opportunity to participate in the risk governance process in Norway than in Russia.